Sybil Ludington was born on April 5, 1761, in the small town of Kent, in what was then known as the province of New York. Her father, Colonel Henry Ludington, was a respected officer in the local militia and an influential figure in the region. Her mother, Abigail Ludington, was a homemaker devoted to raising the couple's 12 children. Sybil was the eldest, and from an early age, she was thrust into a position of responsibility, helping her mother care for her younger siblings. This upbringing instilled in her a sense of duty, resilience, and leadership qualities that would later define her most famous contribution to American history. The Ludington family lived during a turbulent period in colonial America. Tensions between the colonies and Great Britain were escalating rapidly by the 70s. The Stamp Act, the Boston Tea Party, and the growing resentment toward British taxation had created a charged atmosphere. Sybil, though only a child, grew up in an environment where discussions of liberty, independence, and resistance were common around the family table. Her father's role as a militia colonel placed the family in the center of revolutionary fervor. Henry Ludington was not only a military man, but also a farmer and businessman. His reputation for integrity and leadership meant that local residents often turned to him for guidance. He commanded a regiment of nearly 400 militia soldiers, men who were farmers by trade but warriors when duty called. This regiment was crucial for defending the Hudson River Valley, a strategic area often targeted by British forces during the Revolutionary War. Sybil's childhood was thus far from ordinary. Unlike many girls of her era, who were confined to domestic duties, she was exposed to the realities of war and politics. She learned the values of courage and sacrifice directly from her father. While she did help with traditional household work, she also assisted in managing farm operations and took responsibility for tasks that many young women of her time would never have encountered. This early immersion in responsibility prepared her for the defining night of her life. In 1777, despite the hardships of colonial life, the Ludington household was one filled with discipline, faith, and patriotism. Education was limited in rural New York, especially for girls, but Sybil was bright and observant. She absorbed the conversations of soldiers who came to meet her father, listening carefully to their stories of battles, losses, and hopes for freedom. Through these experiences, she developed a deep sense of identity as an American, long before the nation formally declared independence. As the Revolution moved closer to the Hudson Valley, danger was never far from the Ludington farm. The family was well aware that their open support for the Patriot cause put them at constant risk of attack from British troops or loyalist neighbors. Henry Ludington himself was a marked man. If captured, he could have been executed for treason against the crown. This looming threat made the entire household vigilant, and it required even the children to be ready to assist when danger approached. By the time she reached her mid-teens, Sybil was already recognized as mature beyond her years. The responsibilities she carried, the sacrifices she made for her family, and the environment of political unrest combined to shape her into someone capable of extraordinary action. Few could have predicted, however, that this young girl would soon ride into the storm of history, forever etching her name, though too often forgotten, into the legacy of the American Revolution. By the mid-1770s, the American colonies were fully engulfed in the flames of revolution. Tension had been mounting for years, but the outbreak of armed conflict at Lexington and Concord in April 1775 marked the official beginning of the Revolutionary War. Families like the Ludingtons found themselves caught between ordinary life and extraordinary duty. For Sybil, barely a teenager, the war was not a distant event, it was happening in her backyard. Her father, Colonel Henry Ludington, was tasked with organizing and training the local militia, men who were not professional soldiers, but farmers and tradesmen committed to defending their homes. His regiment was strategically significant because the Hudson River Valley was a lifeline of communication and supply. If the British gained control of this region, they could effectively cut New England off from the rest of the colonies, strangling the rebellion. Thus, the role of the Ludingtons and their neighbors carried weight far beyond their small community. Life for the Ludington family was constantly under pressure. Loyalist spies operated in the region, seeking information on militia activities. British raiding parties often struck towns and farms, destroying supplies and spreading fear. The Ludington farm became both a command center and a target. Soldiers frequently visited to receive orders, rest, or deliver intelligence. For a young girl like Sybil, these visits were not trivial. She observed firsthand the gravity of war, the seriousness of planning, and the courage of those willing to sacrifice everything for freedom. The Revolutionary War was not just fought on battlefields, but also in homes, villages, and communities. The Patriot cause required constant vigilance, and even children were expected to contribute. Young Sybil assisted her mother with household chores, but also became accustomed to delivering messages for her father when the militia needed quick coordination. These small errands were, in a way, training for the larger ride she would one day undertake. The colonies themselves were deeply divided. While many supported independence, others remained loyal to Britain. This division turned neighbor against neighbor and, in some cases, family against family. Violence and intimidation were common, and no one could be certain of safety. For the Ludingtons, open defiance of the British crown made them enemies in the eyes of loyalists. Yet Henry Ludington's leadership and Sybil's determination to support him placed the family firmly among the Patriots. By 1777, the stakes had risen dramatically. The war had spread across multiple fronts, and both the British and the Americans were trying to secure strategic victories. The Hudson River Valley became a focal point of British strategy. That spring, British troops launched raids in Connecticut, targeting supply depots critical to the Patriot cause. When one such raid struck Danbury on April 26, 1777, it set in motion the events that would bring Sybil Ludington into history. Though she was only 16, Sybil had already developed the physical stamina and mental resilience needed for what lay ahead. Growing up on a farm demanded hard work, fetching water, carrying supplies, and assisting with agricultural labor all contributed to her strength. Her courage, shaped by the constant presence of danger, gave her the ability to face challenges that most adults would have feared. The Revolutionary War did not allow childhood to last long, and Sybil's moment of destiny was fast approaching. On the night of April 26, 1777, the small town of Danbury, Connecticut, came under attack by British forces. The raid was brutal and swift. British troops burned homes, destroyed supplies, and seized valuable resources, striking fear into the hearts of the local population. Danbury had been chosen as a target because it was a crucial supply depot for the Continental Army. By eliminating these stores, the British hoped to cripple the Patriots' ability to fight. Colonel Henry Ludington received word that the British were marching toward Danbury. As commander of his regiment, he needed to rally his men immediately. But there was a problem. His troops were scattered across the countryside, many miles from his home. Someone had to ride through the night, warn the soldiers, and summon them to arms. With the militia spread out over a wide area, this task required stamina, speed, and the courage to face the dangers of the road. Colonel Ludington himself could not leave, as he needed to coordinate defenses and prepare those already at his farm. Dispatching an ordinary messenger might have been risky. Many could falter in the face of danger, and loyalist patrols or British scouts roamed the region. At that critical moment, 16-year-old Sybil stepped forward. Without hesitation, she volunteered to take the ride that would become her defining act of heroism. The decision was extraordinary. In a society where women, especially young girls, were rarely entrusted with such responsibility, Sybil's determination stood out. But her father knew her courage and capability. He entrusted her with the mission, fully aware of the dangers she would face. Armed only with a stick to defend herself and riding her horse, Star, she set off into the darkness. The conditions were harsh. Rain poured down as thunder rumbled in the distance. Roads were muddy and visibility was poor. Yet Sybil pressed on, riding more than 40 miles through the night, twice the distance of Paul Revere's more famous ride. Along the way, she stopped at the homes of militia soldiers, banging on doors, calling them to arms, and urging them to join her father's regiment. Her youth and determination inspired many. Her courage was contagious. The dangers were real and constant. The countryside was filled with loyalists who would not hesitate to stop or harm her if discovered. Wild animals and treacherous terrain added further risk. Despite these threats, Sybil continued tirelessly, refusing to give in to fear or exhaustion. By the time she returned home near dawn, she had successfully rallied nearly the entire regiment. The result of Sybil's ride was significant. Thanks to her warning, hundreds of militia soldiers gathered in time to confront the British at Ridgefield. While the Patriots could not fully prevent the destruction at Danbury, they did inflict casualties on the British and demonstrated their resilience. Sybil's bravery ensured that her father, his regiment, was present at this critical moment, and her ride became a symbol of youthful patriotism and determination. Though not immediately recognized in the same way as Paul Revere, Sybil's contribution was no less important. She had shown that courage knows no age and no gender. Her ride was a defining moment not only for her family but for the revolutionary cause itself. When most Americans hear the phrase midnight ride, they immediately think of Paul Revere, whose ride on April 18, 1775, was immortalized in Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's famous poem. Yet in many ways, Sybil Ludington's ride was more demanding, more dangerous, and equally, if not more, impactful. While Revere rode roughly 20 miles before being captured by British troops, Sybil covered a distance of about 40 miles through rain and darkness, and she returned safely, having successfully rallied her father's regiment. The disparity in recognition between the two rides highlights the influence of cultural memory and storytelling. Revere's ride became legendary because it was celebrated in poetry and taught widely in schools, whereas Sybil's achievement was relegated to local lore and only occasionally recorded in early history texts. The fact that Sybil was a 16-year-old girl likely contributed to this oversight. At a time when society rarely acknowledged women as participants in war, her contribution was seen as an anomaly rather than a defining act of patriotism. Yet when examined carefully, Sybil's ride demonstrates not only remarkable courage, but also the evolving role of women in the Revolutionary era. Women were expected to maintain households and support their families, but many found themselves directly involved in the struggle for independence. From organizing boycotts of British goods to managing farms in the absence of men, women played essential roles that history has too often minimized. Sybil's ride was a dramatic example of such participation. Her journey took her across sparsely populated countryside, where danger lurked at every turn. Loyalist neighbors, British patrols, and common outlaws posed threats. In some accounts, she used her stick to fend off potential attackers, while in others, the sheer speed and determination of her ride discouraged interference. Either way, the risk was substantial. Even the natural world presented challenges. Wild animals, swollen streams, and treacherous mud could have easily ended her mission. That she overcame all of these obstacles speaks to her courage and endurance. Sybil's ride also symbolized the personal sacrifices made by countless unnamed individuals during the Revolutionary War. While generals and statesmen received fame and recognition, ordinary men and women bore the brunt of the struggle. Farmers supplied food, blacksmiths repaired weapons, and children ran messages through dangerous territory. Sybil embodied this spirit of ordinary heroism elevated by extraordinary circumstances. By comparing her ride to Paul Revere's, historians invite us to rethink what makes a hero memorable. Is it the scale of the act, the immediate impact, or the way it is remembered in culture? Sybil's story challenges us to reconsider how many other heroes have been overlooked, simply because they did not fit the dominant narrative of their time. The morning after Sybil Ludington's ride, her father's regiment and other local militia forces marched to confront the British troops retreating from Danbury. The engagement that followed became known as the Battle of Ridgefield. Fought on April 27, 1777, while the Patriots could not undo the destruction inflicted on Danbury, they were able to harass and slow the British, inflicting casualties and boosting morale among the local population. The presence of Colonel Ludington's regiment was critical. Without Sybil's midnight warning, many of these men might not have arrived in time to take part in the fighting. Although the battle itself was technically a British victory, the resistance demonstrated by the militia helped prove that the Patriot cause was far from broken. It reinforced the idea that even in the face of overwhelming British power, ordinary citizens could fight back effectively. For Sybil, the immediate aftermath was both exhausting and rewarding. Having ridden all night through storm and danger, she returned to a community that now looked upon her with newfound respect. While official recognition was scarce, those who had seen her determination spread word of her courage. Her ride became part of local memory, passed down in stories, even if it did not gain the national fame it deserved. The Battle of Ridgefield itself was significant for strategic reasons. The British had aimed to cripple Patriot supply lines, but their destruction of Danbury only hardened resistance in the region. Connecticut, New York, and surrounding colonies intensified their efforts to support the Continental Army. In this sense, Sybil's ride contributed indirectly to a strengthening of the revolutionary cause. Despite the importance of her actions, the realities of 18th century society meant that Sybil quickly returned to domestic life. Unlike Paul Revere, who continued to play a public role, Sybil was expected to resume her duties at home. The Revolutionary War demanded constant vigilance, and the Ludington family remained under pressure. But Sybil's personal heroics were largely confined to that single, unforgettable night. Nevertheless, the story of her ride circulated within the community for years. Local veterans told it with admiration, and her father never failed to acknowledge the essential role his daughter had played in rallying his men. It became a private legacy long before it gained wider recognition. For Sybil herself, the satisfaction of having fulfilled her duty was enough, even if she could not have imagined that generations later, historians would rediscover her story as one of the most remarkable feats of the Revolutionary War. After the Revolutionary War ended, Sybil Ludington's life transitioned into a quieter, though not less meaningful existence. Like many heroes of the Revolution, she returned to ordinary responsibilities, her great act of courage fading from the national spotlight. At the age of 23, she married Edmund Ogden, a fellow patriot, who had also served in the Continental Army. Together, they settled in Catskill, New York, where they raised a family and worked to build a stable life in the new United States. Life in post-revolutionary America was far from easy. The nation was struggling to define itself politically and economically, and ordinary families faced hardships ranging from debt to unstable markets. Sybil, like many women of her generation, focused on supporting her family through domestic labor, farming, and community involvement. Her marriage to Ogden was stable, but the couple endured the struggles common to early Americans, trying to rebuild after years of war. Tragically, Sybil's later years were marked by financial difficulties and personal loss. Records suggest that she and her husband faced economic challenges, and after his death in 1838, she lived in relative obscurity. Unlike many revolutionary figures who received pensions or recognition, Sybil remained largely unacknowledged by the government. In fact, it was only much later, long after her death, that she began to receive the historical attention her actions deserved. Despite these hardships, Sybil never lost her sense of duty or resilience. Those who knew her described her as dignified and strong, characteristics consistent with the girl who had ridden 40 miles in the storm to rally troops. Her legacy lived quietly in the memories of her descendants and local community, who continued to share the story of her ride even when the wider nation forgot. Sybil Ludington passed away on February 26, 1839, at the age of 77. She was buried near her home in Paterson, New York. At the time, her death was not widely noted outside her community, yet history has since come to recognize that her life symbolized the countless sacrifices of ordinary individuals, especially women, who played vital roles in the struggle for independence, but whose names were long neglected for decades after her death. Sybil Ludington remained largely unknown outside her immediate community. It was not until the late 19th and early 20th centuries that historians began to uncover and publish accounts of her ride. As interest in women's contributions to history grew, Sybil's story gained renewed attention. In 1907, her descendants worked to preserve her memory by erecting monuments and sharing her story with historical societies. Over time, she became recognized as a symbol of youthful courage and female patriotism during the Revolution. Today, several landmarks commemorate her ride. A bronze statue of Sybil on horseback stands in Carmel, New York, erected in 1961, near the route she traveled. Historical markers trace parts of her midnight journey, reminding passers-by of the forgotten heroine who once galloped through the storm to summon freedom fighters. Sybil's recognition also reached national institutions. The Daughters of the American Revolution, an organization dedicated to honoring the memory of those who fought for independence, celebrated her story and highlighted her as an example of women's often overlooked contributions. Schools, libraries, and local museums have since incorporated her tale into their programs. Nevertheless, Sybil has never achieved the same level of cultural fame as Paul Revere. While his name is universally recognized in American classrooms, hers remains unfamiliar to most. The reasons for this disparity are complex. Gender biases of the 18th and 19th centuries, the absence of a famous poem to immortalize her ride, and the tendency of history to focus on men in positions of formal authority. Yet in recent decades, efforts to highlight diverse voices have brought Sybil closer to the recognition she deserves. Her story also resonates strongly with contemporary audiences seeking role models of courage, resilience, and selflessness. In an era where women's contributions are more fully acknowledged, Sybil's ride stands as a reminder that the fight for freedom was never the work of men alone. Her heroism was not an exception, but part of a larger pattern of women who acted decisively in moments of crisis. The legacy of Sybil Ludington extends far beyond the details of her midnight ride. She symbolizes the thousands of women whose contributions to the Revolutionary War have gone largely unrecorded. While her 40-mile journey is dramatic and inspiring, it also represents a broader truth. Independence was won not only by generals and soldiers, but by ordinary citizens who acted bravely when their nation needed them most. In modern times, Sybil has become a figure of inspiration in education and literature. Children's books recount her story, presenting her as a role model for young readers. Authors and historians have used her life to challenge the traditional, male-centered narratives of the Revolution, urging Americans to recognize that heroism knows no gender or age. Schools in New York and Connecticut bear her name, ensuring that local children grow up aware of her contributions. Her ride has also inspired artists and cultural commemorations. Statues, plaques, and reenactments bring her journey to life for contemporary audiences. Each April, communities in New York remember her ride with ceremonies that honor her determination. Such recognition reflects a growing awareness of the importance of integrating women's stories into the national memory. Sybil's story also raises questions about how history chooses its heroes. The fact that Paul Revere's ride became iconic while hers remained obscure highlights the role of storytelling, literature, and cultural emphasis in shaping collective memory. Her legacy challenges us to think critically about whose stories are celebrated and whose are forgotten. Ultimately, Sybil Ludington stands as a reminder that history is incomplete without acknowledging the hidden and unsung figures who shaped its course. Her courage and determination continue to inspire new generations, encouraging us to value resilience, sacrifice, and patriotism wherever they are found. In the 21st century, the story of Sybil Ludington resonates with remarkable power. Her courage speaks not only to the historical context of the American Revolution, but also to contemporary struggles for recognition, equality, and justice. She demonstrates that age, gender, and social expectations are no barriers to greatness when duty calls. For young people, Sybil's ride is a story of empowerment. At just 16, she took on a mission that would have daunted even experienced adults. Her example teaches that leadership and bravery are not confined to those in authority, but can emerge from anyone willing to act decisively. For women, her story is an affirmation that their role in shaping history has always been significant, even when overlooked by traditional narratives. Her relevance extends beyond gender. In an age where civic responsibility and patriotism are often debated, Sybil embodies the principle that freedom requires sacrifice from all citizens, not only from professional soldiers or politicians. Her willingness to face danger for the greater good is a lesson in responsibility that remains timeless. Moreover, Sybil's obscurity itself offers a valuable lesson. The fact that her name is far less recognized than Paul Revere's reminds us to question the stories we are taught and the voices we prioritize. By rediscovering Sybil, we also rediscover the countless others whose contributions shaped America but whose names remain hidden in archives or family lore. Today, as society seeks to build a more inclusive historical record, Sybil Ludington serves as a bridge between past and present. She challenges us to celebrate not only the famous but also the forgotten, to value every act of courage, and to recognize that greatness often rides quietly through the night. Unseen and unsung, her ride through the storm remains a powerful metaphor. Even in the darkest moments, one determined individual can rally others and alter the course of history. In remembering Sybil Ludington, we honor not just her 40-mile journey, but the enduring spirit of ordinary patriots who gave extraordinary service in the fight for freedom.